Hi, this is Josh Marshall from TPM Media. It's Wednesday, October 29th, 2008, 6 days until the November election. Yesterday we looked at the Senate and particularly the chances the Democrats will get a 60-vote majority that will allow them to break any filibuster in the next Congress. Today we're going to look at the House and try to give you an overview of just how many seats are in play and particularly, again, just how many seats the Democrats seem likely to pick up in the next Congress. If you watch elections closely, you know that there's a number of small niche publications that keep rating lists of congressional elections, and they predict the likelihood of a particular contest going to the Republicans or the Democrats. Now today we're working with 4 different rating services. One's Larry Sabato, Charlie Cook, Stuart Rothenberg, and the ratings list put together by Congressional Quarterly. Now each of these ratings lists rates each congressional race as toss-up, leans Republican, likely Republican, or safe Republican, and the same on the Democratic side. In some cases, the wording they use is a little different, but it's the same idea in each of these ratings lists. So what we've done is put all 4 of these lists together and come up with the consensus rating of all 4, and in the cases where it's a tie, we've added our own rating of a race as the tiebreaker. So with this composite rating, we're going to look at 66 House seats now controlled by the Republicans that by one definition or another seem to be competitive this year. So first, Republican-held seats that are now listed either likely Dem or lean Dem. This is, again, ones where the Democrats, by this rating system, already have an advantage to win. The number for that is 11. Next up are those races rated as a toss-up, where it's just too close to call, neither side has a clear advantage. That number is 23. Now again, these are toss-ups in seats that are currently held by the Republicans. So every one of these that goes to a Democrat is a Democratic pickup. The next category are the seats that are listed as a Republican lean. This means it's very close, but the Republican candidate has a narrow advantage. The number of that group is 13. Now, the last category are those rated likely Republican, and the number in this category is 19. Again, these are races where the Republican candidate has a clear advantage, but it's still a competitive race. Now, there's 3 more points to keep in mind on the Republican side. One is that over the last 2 months, more and more seats have been moving in the Democratic direction. So for instance, races that were rated Republican lean have been moving into toss-up, toss-ups have been moving into Democratic lean, and so forth. So the momentum seems to be all on the Democrat side. Second, the real unknown factor here is the scale of what in yesterday's episode we call the Democratic tide. How much are Democrats just on enthusiasm and turnout going to have a big advantage that tilts a lot of these toss-up races into the Democratic column? We don't know the answer to that, but one thing that people on both sides of the aisle are going to be watching closely is Barack Obama's ground game and how much there's a spillover effect with the success of that mobilization effort spilling over into House races and tipping some of the close calls to the Democrats. Now, the last point to keep in mind is the power of incumbency. It's not just that this is a really bad year for Republicans, it's also that the Republicans this cycle have 28 seats they're defending where the incumbent is not on the ballot. Most of those are cases where the incumbent simply retired after the 2006 cycle. In a few cases, it's because the incumbent was defeated in a primary, in most cases, by a more right-wing Republican candidate. So just to review, we have 66 Republican seats that by some definition are competitive, although a lot of those are only barely competitive. And out of those 66, we can say that conservatively the Democrats seem likely to pick up upwards of 20 seats. No guarantee, but that seems a decent estimate. And where we go between a 20-seat pickup or perhaps a 30-seat pickup is just the unknown that's going to have a lot to do with the final factors going into the race, levels of turnout, levels of enthusiasm, and of course a lot of incidental factors in individual races like the Michelle Bachmann race, where a candidate just pulls a kind of an unforced error at the last minute that puts them in danger. Now, the vulnerability this cycle is almost all on the Republican side, but not entirely. There's also a few Democrats that are in danger. We're going to look at those now. First up, we have Nick Lamson, Representative Nick Lamson in Texas's 22nd district. This is Tom DeLay's old district, and it was really kind of a fluke that Lamson even got in back in 2006. The Republicans were really battered by Tom DeLay's indictment and then resignation from the House. So he barely got in back in 2006, and it's really going to be a challenge for the Democrats to hold on to this seat this year. So this one leans Republican, though perhaps with a big Obama turnout, they could bring Lampson across the finish line. Next up is Paul Kanjorski in Pennsylvania. This is the one case this cycle where you have a Democrat who there's no scandal, there's no major gaffe. It's just that this one has turned out to be a lot more competitive than people thought, and this one's a toss-up. Next up, we have Representative Jack Murtha in Pennsylvania's 12th district. Now, Murtha is a longtime incumbent. He became a big target of Republicans because of his position on the Iraq War and his very plain-spoken opposition to it. Now, just recently, he made the always a big electoral mistake of calling a lot of his constituents racists. Now, even though he apologized for that, that seems to have given Republicans an opening, and now they're putting a lot of money into that race. Murtha still seems like a pretty likely shot for a re-election, but it's at least somewhat in contention now. Now, finally, we have Representative Tim Mahoney down in Florida's 16th district. Now, Mahoney is the guy who won the seat last held by Mark Foley, and it seems like there may be some weird mojo connected to that seat, because just recently it's come out that Mahoney has seemingly had affairs with maybe about half the people in Florida, a lot of affairs and some weird money, funny business. So this was always going to be a somewhat of a hard seat to defend for the Democrats. It's kind of a Republican district, but now with all of Mahoney's scandals, it looks like this one's going to turn over to the Republicans. Now, we do have a few more Democratic incumbent freshmen who are in somewhat contested races, but most of those seem to be trending in the Democratic direction. And with the overall lay of the land leaning towards the Democrats, we think most of those are going to come through. So overall, we think this is a pretty good overview of what the outlook looks like for the House of Representatives. Again, seems like a good bet. Democrats will get at least upwards of 20 seat pickup, possibly substantially more. A lot of that depends on the ground game and a lot of these idiosyncrasies and particulars in individual races. I'm Josh Marshall from TPM Media, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.